Work-life balance, I guess, would be a regret. I work too hard for someone who doesn't really care at the end of the day.
Meet Bill, a Canadian who moved to Singapore in 1989. Surprisingly, he still doesn't hold the PR. Over 10 years ago, he left his corporate job and launched a successful Panama Hat salon. We discuss how to settle well in Singapore, why one should consider buying a house in Batam, and the life regrets of a 65-year-old expat. I'm Max, entrepreneur and YouTuber from Singapore. Let's dive in.
What's your 3 favorite things about Singapore?
Biggest one is security. I think in today's world, security is, you can't put a price on it. Secondly, I love Singapore because there's no earthquakes, there's no volcanoes, there's no tsunamis, there's no hurricanes, there's no bizarre weather effects. So it's very predictable and very consistent, which I like. The food and the weather is great. Yeah, it's just easy. It's a nice lifestyle.
What's the 3 worst things about Singapore for you? Or the things that you would like to change?
Singapore has everything to offer. I mean, if it goes down to the bare minimum, going out and going to a real good market in Europe to get fresh produce is something that you miss out here because everything's shipped in. They don't make anything here. But other than that, there's nothing I really dislike about Singapore.
Can you name your favorite places to go, favorite spots in Singapore?
I lived all over, and I do feel that the Joo Chiat area where the shop is located is an up-and-coming area. Of course, there's Tiong Bahru. Singapore is broken up into neighborhoods. If you go down Keong Siak, there's some incredible restaurants down there in Chinatown. There's just so many. There's not a lot to do in Singapore except shop and eat. And if you enjoy eating, you can go out and discover incredible restaurants from local to foreign.
If you feel like getting away somewhere, you buy a flight ticket and then you go where? Within 2 hours flight.
Well, we have a beach house over at Batam, so we're 40 minutes away, which takes us to exactly what we want. But you can go to a couple of places called Chepadek or Nikoi, which is beautiful private islands off the coast of Bintan, and it takes around 2.5 hours to 3 hours to get there, and you got some of the most incredible holiday experience you can imagine. You can go to, of course, Bali, you can go to Phuket, you can go to some of the islands on the east side of Malaysia. There's plenty of places to discover, plenty. Now that COVID is finished, basically, and borders are open and it's free to travel, there's a lot to choose from.
Can you compare life in Canada and Singapore?
Singapore is a great place to live. It's safe, it's small, you can't get lost. Predominantly English speaking, it's clean, it's got so much going for it. It's the central of Asia, so you can get down to Australia easily, you can get to Europe easily, you can get to India and the Middle East very easy. So it's very nicely located. Compared to Canada, it's just cold and high taxes, and it's a big country with very few people. So it's we just find the lifestyle in Asia much more to our liking.
What other countries do you like here in the region you like to travel to?
Well, we have a property on an island, Batam, next door, so it's very quick to get there, and we travel to Europe quite often.
Can you compare Singapore to Europe, let's say? What's your favorite cities, places in Europe?
Favorite cities is Rome, of course. Anywhere in Italy is wonderful. It's always romantic, but it's a country that everyone loves to visit, but probably more difficult to live there. Yeah, we have a place in Denmark, and we love going there. So there's so many places in the world to explore, but we call Singapore home for now.
How to settle well in Singapore?
I think, moving from one country to the next always is a bit of a culture shock. One has to be open-minded. One has to be able to be fluent in English at least in order to successfully communicate to people around you. Singapore is not a place where you can just at post-COVID, most countries in the world has closed their borders for their own reasons. So they become a little bit more inward thinking. So if you go to any country, you have to make sure you have the proper documentation with the initiative to either stay and be very clear on your documentation, make sure it's done properly for you. And it's always good to engage a lawyer or an immigration specialist to help you get that part settled in. Most major cities around the world are pricey and expensive, so you have to make sure you have the proper equity and funding to do so. If not, of course, if a job brings you over here, the company will actually sponsor you.
You mentioned like culture shocks. Did you have any culture shocks when you first came to Singapore?
I left Canada when I was 21, so I was pretty open-minded. I let everything happen the way it did. I moved to the Philippines. You get a little bit of a culture shock with security, and you go to a place like a less developed country, you see more poverty, you see more pollution, you see weaknesses in the infrastructure, whether it be communications and stuff like that. But in my 4 40 years out here, leaps and bounds. I mean, some countries never had landline telephones. They've just gone from no phones to mobile phones. So it's really quite amazing.
Do you hold PR in Singapore?
No, I
If I
don't.
may ask?
No, I don't.
If I may ask, why not?
That you have to take up with the Singapore government. They don't tell you why they don't want you to PR or not. So no, we've made applications, but we weren't successful. So I run the business as a private limited, and I'm on an EP.
Can I ask you, what's your age?
65.
Do you have any regrets in life, like at 65?
I regret I didn't start my own business sooner and work too much for a corporate entity. Work-life balance, I guess, would be a regret. I work too hard for someone who doesn't really care at the end of the day. So for anyone who is chasing the corporate dream, unless it's your own corporate dream, it's not worth chasing, because in today's age, you're fully dispensable.
What would be your advice for someone who is like thinking about starting something by his own, but maybe has some fears or not sure?
If you're going to start a business on your own, one, you need the best ideas can fail if you don't have enough capital. So you got to have funding to be able to set it up and make sure you have a business plan and a budget. Secondly, I would really encourage people to think out of the box and make sure whatever they do is something that unique, that is not already on the offering table. You'll go around Singapore and you'll see a street and there'll be 5 pet shops on it, or 6 bike shops on it, or 8 coffee shops on it. You have to be able to offer something that is totally unique in order to make a difference, especially in Singapore, which is a small market. In a bigger society and bigger population country, you can maybe get away with it. But if you want to start a business, any business, money, a proper business plan, and make sure that it's unique and you don't have too much competition, because competition will only drive your market down.
How much do you need to start?
I started with 70 hats 10 years ago, and that the investment was small. I started it out of my own home, so it just grew and grew and grew. So as the money came in, I did not pay myself. I did not spend any money on anything, because my company at the time was paying for the house rental. All the money I made went straight into the bank, and that helped a lot. What's your base color? What do you wear a lot of?
Black, white, green.
Try that on. It may be a little bit small, because you got a big noggin.
What's the price range for the hats?
They start as low as 165.
Do you have any principles about money in general? How you save, how you invest, like the main things that you learn through the way?
Yeah, don't believe in private bank financial advisors. They're all crooks. I think for any young person, my advice to them would to be buy property.
Buy property.
Buy property. Buy property. Buy property. And when market goes up, leverage against some of those properties and buy a bigger property. But property is, they don't make any more land, so that's a commodity that will always go up no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what. But everything else is a scam. Private financiers and all that stuff is garbage.
If you like this video, check out the next one. But you have only 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.